What's going on YouTube? It's your boy Flycat back with another video of Why I Love. Actually on episode 2 here, and as you can see we are playing some BattleToads for the Nintendo Entertainment System, released in 1993 if I remember correctly. And this game is flippin' amazing. So, it is also part of the Rare compilation, Rare Replay, Ultimate Play the Game Fest, whatever you want to call it. And it's one of the games that I think is known in the video game industry and among video game advocates for being really, really difficult. Now, when this came out back in the day, first of all, I need to clarify, I didn't play this when I was a kid. I didn't know anyone who had this. In fact, I'd never even heard of it. But Microsoft is doing such a good job of trying to make you recognize the franchises that they have on their lineup that they're even introducing, or reintroducing in this case, some of the older franchises. So, BattleToads is really, really freaking hard, man. Basically, in each of the stages, I've died countless times thus far. The tiniest mess up can kill you. I mean, technically speaking, it's a brawling type of game where you're supposed to be mashing one of two attack buttons on these enemies here, as you can see me doing, and they should be flying away. And I kind of have this first level, the first couple memorized, and I've gotten, I should clarify, about more than halfway through the game, actually, about 60% of the way through the levels. Thanks to the new Rare Rewind feature, which lets you use the left trigger to simply rewind the game. And you're going to die a lot, like I said, so it's really, really helpful. But I still kind of envy the game for being so... I guess envy isn't the right word. I really admire the game for being so difficult, because nowadays I feel as though when we play a game, we're kind of coddled. We're told exactly what to do. Everything is spelled out for us. Go to this position, take this thing out by pressing one button, doing one quick time event or something like that. Go through this area, get a achievement or a trophy, and move on. But that wasn't the case with BattleToads. And each of the levels offered something different too. It wasn't purely a side-scrolling platform or a side-scrolling beat-em-up. Although I do think that for games like, Devil May Cry or Dante's Inferno or God of War, things like that, they owe a lot to the BattleToads franchise, because this was really, to my knowledge, one of the first instances of a beat-em-up, of taking multiple hits to kill enemies. They had the arcade machines were like that too. I remember playing a 4-player Simpsons game in arcades when I was a kid that was a similar way. It was a beat-em-up, but this is one of the earliest beat-em-ups. And so there's a lot to the genetics of those type of games that's owed to BattleToads. And it has a wacky style. It's a little more adult than some of your other typical side-scrollers. Like, look at Mario and look at Rayman. And then look at this, right? It's different because the others, as I said, are purely for, platforming and exploration, while BattleToads rewards combat and constant boss encounters and really, really fast reflexes. So, this particular, I guess, tunnel or whatever you want to call it right here is really, really dangerous, because those birds can kill you in one hit. If they cut your rope, you fall and use a life. You see the pink hearts in the upper part of my screen right there? That's how many continues you have. So I have 4, and then my health is the red squares underneath my score on the upper left. But you can also pick up weapons in this game. As you can see, I have a sword or like a katana type of thing. These enemies are really fucking obnoxious, and if they hit you twice, and if they hit you once, most of the time they're going to hit you a second time. If they hit you twice, you fall and you just immediately lose a life. It's really, really bad. So you need to try to take them out as quickly as you can. But, yeah, and in the first part of the game, I had a sort of steel pipe that I was using to hit enemies. And, these things will make the game easier. There's one portion in particular on a speeder bike that has the option to be played separately as kind of a side challenge from the game's main menu. And I'd say it's one of the hardest single sections of a game that I've ever played. But I just, I don't know. I love BattleToads because there's an aesthetic to it. It feels kind of grungy. It is, at points, unjustly hard, right? Especially when playing on a new controller, and the game's not really meant to be played on that, and you can tell if you're trying to use an analog stick for something that's meant to be played with a D-pad for movement, it's going to feel unresponsive and it's going to feel clunky. And there are times when I was first playing this game and I was using the analog stick that I would go to jump over a chasm and I would just simply jump into it and, lose my life, fall in for no fucking reason. And it's just one of those really, really steep learning curves. I should say, too, that I watched a speed run of this game, and it was beaten 32 minutes by, the runner's name was the Mexican Runner, I believe. And he was at a AGDQ or a SGDQ, which were speedrunning charity events. If you want to check it out, it's definitely worth it, because after you've played the game and you know how difficult it is, to see someone go through it so quickly is really just mind-boggling. If you lose all your lives, all your hearts, you do get one continue, and then if you lose them again, you restart the whole game, as was common back in the day. There's no, save states. There's no holding your hand to let you, like, oh, you can beat it, just keep trying. No, definitely not. And because these experiences were, on the Nintendo, they can't be particularly long games. What that means is that the difficulty has to scale in such a way that people will be coming back to complete it or to play the game. A lot of times, if you look at comments for this game, on like any sort of YouTube videos or whatever, you'll find that people, especially on the speedrunning one, I found that people said, wow, I can't believe this guy beat this game in 30 minutes. I rented it my whole childhood and I got to the 3rd level. I mean, that was pretty common. It wasn't really, at least with some gaming experiences, Mega Man or something like that was a little bit more contained, where once you knew how to play a Mega Man, you could pick it up and you could beat it in a couple hours or in a weekend if you had some time. But I don't think that was ever really the case with BattleToads. And there's a later iteration of the game called BattleToads Arcade, which they also released on Rare Replay, but I'm not going to include as part of this series because I didn't feel it was quite as influential to the gaming landscape, and it wasn't such a notable entry for the gaming industry. But it was still really cool, and they did something else with the characters. And from what I understand, they might even be looking to do something with the BattleToads franchise on the next-gen consoles, make a new game. Which is pretty great. I mean, they're doing all this work with Rare. Microsoft, when I say they, is doing all this work with Rare, to put out this compilation. And if you look at the list of games that were going to be available for backwards compatibility on the Xbox One starting in November, many of them are featured in Rare Replay already. Meaning that if you already have Rare Replay, in fact, a lot of the backwards compatibility games you've already had for months. So it's kind of a way for them to test out the service, to make sure it works, and then to implement it on a much larger scale. That also being said, they're putting a lot of faith in Rare, and they're reintroducing a lot of people to these franchises, and Banjo-Kazooie, and Perfect Dark and things like that are some of the first to be available for backwards compatibility on the Xbox One. So I think that this signals a return to Rare, a return to the faith in the studio, and with that, I think it would be appropriate if a new BattleToads came out. So that's my 2 cents on that. This level right here is coming up to the hover bike, and I really want you guys to see it. But these little platforms that I'm standing on here, even, like, if I would have punched that enemy too hard and fallen off the edge, if the animation, even, without me pressing that direction, would have hit me off the edge, there's no forgiveness. I would have just died and had to use my continue. It's ridiculous. So even that kick it's all risk and all reward. Making these jumps, too, you definitely want to use the D-pad. But okay, so this is the speeder bike portion, and it's ridiculous. You'll see the things flash on the right side of the screen, letting you know if it's towards the top, the bottom, or the middle of the path. There's jumps, there's things you have to go over, under, around, and it's just all around really difficult. I think in total there's maybe 3 or 4 checkpoints during this segment, although I'm not positive because I've only beat it I've only beat it twice. This section also made an appearance. The first portion where you're coming down that tunnel and the crows can cut your rope, and this speeder section made an appearance in Shovel Knight, actually, on the Xbox One release, whereas the PlayStation 4 version of the game had something with Kratos, the God of War, I believe. So that was a nice little addition for them to throw in there for the Xbox. And again, they're adding Zitz, I believe, which is one of the 3 BattleToads. Zitz, Pimple, and Mash, I think. One of the 3 BattleToads they're adding to Killer Instinct for the new season as a playable character. So again, there's a lot of hints, a lot of things pointing at them bringing BattleToads back to a new audience, and them doing some further work with Rare, which, to be clear, I can't wait. So I love BattleToads because it's one of the first beat-em-ups, and you can see the genetics of beat-em-ups. It's got a great art style, it's difficult as hell, the soundtrack is amazing, and it's addictive because it's hard. I guess I repeated myself on some of those aspects, but if you have Rare Replay, or even if you don't and your friend does, it's definitely worth checking out. I think it's $30 right now on the Xbox One. So for your time, that's the game I bought when I got back from Europe a month and a half ago. I haven't really needed to play anything else other than a little bit of Gears of War Ultimate Edition and a little Halo, because there's so many great games to play on there. So the next game that I'm going to be doing for this series will be another one from Rare Replay, but hopefully you guys are enjoying the series. Let me know if you like it in the comments or below, and until next time, take care.